Today is May 14th, 1987. This is Joe, Todd, and Bernice Jackson, an interview with Mr. Turner Quisenberry in Woodward, Oklahoma. So, where were you born?
Born in Kansas City, Missouri.
And when's your birthday?
February 12, 1912.
Who was your father?
J.F. Quisenberry.
And your mother?
Laura Lou Quisenberry.
What was her maiden name?
Turner.
Turner.
That's where I get, of course, my name.
And where are your parents from?
From Kentucky.
Both from Kentucky?
Yes, originally.
And you said that you only knew one of your grandparents?
That's right.
That would be which one?
On my father's side,
Your grandfather or grandmother?
grandfather.
What was his name?
You know, I can't think of it. Sure not.
That's okay. You mentioned that you had an aunt. You talked about Lincoln.
Yes. Quite a character. Aunt Della. We went to a historical building out in Lexington, Kentucky, which is the old home area, and a Negro walked in. She says, they'll line them in the front door these days. That's what she felt about. She was a strong Southerner.
What'd she say about Lincoln?
Well, he had just meddling around on things that he should be meddling around in, as far as she was concerned.
And was she also from Kentucky?
Yes, I think so. We're all hailed around that Lexington area.
What was her name? Della?
Yeah. All I ever called her was Aunt Della. So help me, that's all I know her by.
And what kind of work did your father do?
He was early-day minister here.
Minister.
Preached his first sermon here on February the 1st, 1917.
1970. Why did the family move to Oklahoma?
Well, as I said, my father was a preacher, and he was called here for the Christian church, and been here ever since.
And where was the church located at that time?
At that time, to begin with, 13th and Main. Now the location, Dr. Morrow's clinic.
So you were about 5 years old when you came to
Right,
Woodward?
5 years old, right.
Do you remember the trip to Woodward?
To Woodward?
Yeah.
Well, not really. No, I can't say that I did. I remember when I got here, because there was a sandstorm blowing.
Tell me about it.
Oh, mercy, it was awful. We didn't have paved streets, of course, and the dirt was blowing off the streets, you know, and it was just horrible. Tumbleweeds are flying through the air. I thought we'd come to a jumping off place. Of course, Kansas City was all settled, you know, and I was used to that. Once I was young, 5 years old, we used to anything at that age.
So did you come down on the train?
Yes, everything's trained those days.
You said the streets weren't paved in Guthrie.
But we're
I mean, Woodward, I'm sorry.
no pavement, not even many paved sidewalks. All the sidewalks, whatever we had, was planks, big old wooden planks. I know the Christmas before I came here, I got some skates, and I had to go down to a store down where J.C. Penney is now. They had a little bit of concrete walk there that I could skate on. You couldn't skate on these planks, of course. What a pretty crude place at the time.
What were the streets like when it rained?
Oh my gracious, it was just a quagmire. We had a team of horses and a grader that would grade them, and that was it. Of course, for a while then we had smooth streets until they kept out again. But the first carnival I ever saw in my life was pitched right down on 9th and Main, and if you're familiar here, you know that's right in the heart of town. But I expect maybe the town at that time was around 1500 probably.
What year was that carnival?
Oh, it must have been somewhere around 17 or 18. No, it was after the armistice. It was after 18. So it was around 1920. First Ferris wheel I ever saw was right at the corner of 9th and Main.
And that would be on the north side of Maine.
It was right in the middle of Maine.
Oh, right in the middle of Maine.
It didn't bother the traffic because there wasn't any. Might scare a horse or two, the clap would get too loud, but that was all that happened.
What'd you do on Armistice Day?
Armistice Day?
Yeah.
I remember so distinctly, about a block from the house was the banker's home, which is a magnificent three-story structure, still standing incidentally. And Walter Carey, his son-in-law, leaned out the window and shot a double-barrel shotgun. And I kid, you know, that kind of attracted my attention, and I inquired around, and it was Armistice Day. And so that's why it pegged in my mind. I was a little young, didn't know what all the excitement was about, but I knew something was going on.
When did you see your first automobile?
Oh my gracious, they were kind of a crude get up. I don't remember. Golly. It was mostly horse and buggy when I moved here.
Did your father have a horse and buggy that he traveled in?
No, he had a Model T, and we would sand it down with sandpaper and paint it with a paintbrush. That was my job. I remember that. I had to rub that thing down with, emery cloth, not sandpaper. Yeah, that old black Model T. You know, you can have any color you wanted as long as you want it black.
Yeah. How often did you have to sand it down?
I think every spring, just like house tinting, you know, we had to work on the old Model T. You know, straight black paint and paint it.
Where'd you live in Woodward?
Well, to begin with, at the church location, 13th and Main, and then later on 8th Street, and later on 5th Street, and there's when I got married and bought my own home.
Did you have any chores around the house as a small boy?
Well, the folks, as was custom at the time, had kept cow and chickens, and I had to deliver the milk. That was the main chore, and take care of the cow, of course. Take the cow out, take them out in some vacant lot someplace, let her graze all day.
Okay. And when did you get married?
In 1937. My 50th coming up here next month.
Good. Tell me, how did the Depression affect your family?
Well, I guess we were hard up. I don't know. Only had some plenty to eat, you know. I thought we'd get along all right. But, being a preacher's family, never did have much, so it wasn't much difference. But I'd like to say one thing here before we get too far off the beaten track. I very much interested in history, and I've read everything I could on Woodward history. And they all had one fault in common. They left out the most important characters we had, in my estimation. Namely, Nurse Jones and her brother. Nurse Jones, whose name is now engraved in a plaque over the entrance to the old hospital here, was quite a character. She's about the only medical care we had around here. Incidentally, I can say with that qualification that she saved my brother's life. No question about it.
Tell me about her.
She was a very compassionate woman. I doubt if she had much formal education, but she had years of experience and loved people, and she was just a wonderful lady. And her brother was quite a character. He was an old mule skinner, drove a freight wagon from Fort Dodge to Camp Supply up here. And he was a character. As I say, Woodward in those days probably had 1,500 population, I'm guessing. But he had an old Dodge touring car. And I was just a kid, and anytime he'd get that Dodge touring car out, it was a treat for all us kids. He would come down the street hollering, "Gee haw," to the top of his voice. He's a mule skinner, you see. And he thought he was steering the car, I guess. And then when he got to the destination, I could always hear the same thing. Whoa, damn it, whoa. And then he'd crash into a curb or a hitching post, whatever's handy. But it was every time, and that was the highlight of our life back in those days. He was such a character. I enjoyed him on no end.
What was his
What?
name?
Well, it's either Dad or Pop Jones is all I ever knew him by.
And now Nurse Jones, was she a nurse?
Yes, she was. Now, if you had sickness in your home, you'd call her and she'd just move in. And you made room for her, and she took over, and she did. She knew what she was doing. She gave orders, and you followed her out, and it worked out all right. My brother had pneumonia, and we would have lost him if it wasn't for Nurse Jones.
What'd she do for it?
Well, I don't know. I think it was, we may have had sulfa drugs at the time. We didn't have penicillin. They didn't have that to combat it. So pneumonia was really a very serious disease. Very few people recovered from it. So we felt very fortunate. But I believe sulfa drugs were available.
And how long was she a nurse in this area?
Oh my gracious, she was well established when I moved here in 17. I'd hesitate to say. She was well known when I moved here.
What type of, did she charge a fee, or how was she paid? Or?
Yes, she charged a fee, just about whatever you could pay her. She didn't give much.
What kind of person was she? What'd she look like?
Well, she's a very typical Western woman. She's big, raw boned. No beauty queen, but you'd never notice that, really. She's such a wonderful person, you would never notice that, I tell you. She was tall, bony. I just think the world all over her. Of course, she's long gone now.
Is she buried here at the cemetery?
Yes, that's cemetery. Well, both she and her brother. They lived just about 2 blocks from us, so I kind of felt like I knew them.
Would you describe a dust storm when it's approaching?
Oh my, I can remember the big black one, they called it. I was home, had a date that night. I believe I was in high school. And laying on the bed there, kind of relaxing, and it was all the lights like it is right now. And I rolled over and rolled back, and it was black. I mean, it was night, just like that. It's that quick. That thing had rolled in. It was just horrible. And I met my wife that night, as I said, I had a date, and went to a dance, and you couldn't see across the floor. Oh, those were horrible. You have to live through them to really appreciate them. They're just unbelievable.
Why did those dust storms choke the cars down, or?
Yes, and not only that, they would scare the paint off your car. You had it parked out or had to drive through it. Even back clear up until the middle 30s, 37. I was driving, and I ruined many a paint job. It just scare them like emery cloth.
How'd you keep the dust out of the house?
You didn't. I know when we checked in the hotel, they would have wet sheets hung up over the windows, and all the bedclothes off the bed. And when you checked in, they'd go up, take the sheets down, and put sheets on your bed. Otherwise, it'd be covered with dirt. It was just unbelievable. And you drive down the highway, and there's winds blowing all the time, and dust. You see the spark jump between the barbed wire fence. I've seen it many a time. They had a strange reaction to you. You get lost so easy. Now, I was well acquainted with the area. I've been out there for years, but yet I'd get lost. You forget north and south, east and west. I don't know what, I can't explain that. Now I'm talking about out in the Panhandle now. I traveled from here to Boise City through Guyman.
What kind of work were you doing at that time?
I was the agent of the Internal Revenue Service.
What were your duties as an IRS agent?
Audit income tax.
Were you what they call a revenuer?
Yes, I was a revenuer. I wasn't working on stills, you understand, but that's Kentucky definition of revenue, or they're chasing down stills. But I was chasing down income tax evasion.
What were some of the big cases you worked on? Most interesting cases?
Well, I think the most interesting case was out in the Panhandle, in the middle of the Depression. I called on a farmer who lived in a duplex. He made it in a duplex because he and his wife didn't get along. She lived over on one side of the duplex, he lived on the other. And I'd ask him a question, well, you gotta go over and ask the wife. So I would walk out around the house and talk to her, then I'd come back. But when I got down to the record end of it, he pulled out an old tin box and reached in there and pulled out. At the time, we had just gone to the small dollar bills, you know, the old big ones. He reached in there and pulled out the big dollar bills and old government checks that were yellow with age, actually. He just a regular miner, actually, but he was scared to death that I would come out and rob him, I guess, because that tin box was his life. And perhaps that was the most interesting experience I had, trying to work with that old gentleman.
You had government checks?
Government checks in there, uncashed. And I don't know how old they were, yellow with age, and government checks, as I remember, were kind of a green color. But they faded out and become yellow.
Were they still good, or?
I doubt it. I don't think so. After so long time, surely they become worthless. But he was afraid of banks, and he just wouldn't go into the bank cash them.
What town was that? Close to
Hooker.
Hooker.
Close to Hooker. Of course, I've seen a lot of characters in my day on doing this type of work. People who just live with a dollar, and when you start talking about their pocketbook, they get awful nervous.
Who were the people that were tracking down the stills in this part of the country?
Well, now that's a different branch of service than I was in. I have no idea about that.
How long did you work for this?
37 years.
7 years. You must have found it interesting work.
It was very interesting. I always looked at it as kind of a referee job. There's the overly honest person over here, you know, that overpays his tax. In the middle of the rotor, and then there's a skylark over here. And I thought it was my job to kind of weed them out and see if they kind of got on an even keel. And there's a lot of fine people in this world. I'm here to tell you, I didn't get pessimistic over that at all.
Well, I bet you didn't find too many in Beaver County.
No, Beaver County was...
Beaver County is my county.
Oh, it is?
That's where I was born and raised.
Well, I had a strange experience in Beaver County. I worked with a fellow, he was German. And there's some German up in there, if you remember.
Yes.
And I was questioning this, no, he was questioning a party, this fellow I worked with. And of course they were talking English. Mm-hmm. And I think he might have had him in trouble. And so Mama turned to Papa and said, what did we tell him? And talking in German. And he spoke right back in German. He said, tell him the truth. They didn't know that he could speak German, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't been close by, heard the whole thing. I thought it was rather amusing.
Mm-hmm. So how large is the territory that you covered as an agent?
Well, I worked here to Fairview, to Elk City, west to New Mexico line, Colorado line. The whole panhandle, in other words.
That does include the Texas Panhandle too?
No, we had observed state boundaries.
Oh, okay. Thought since you were federal that you may.
Well, we have, but that's unusual. As far as assigned duties are concerned, it would be within the state of Oklahoma.
Okay. What about during World War II?
World War II, I had a very, very interesting experience. I was special agent with the Intelligence Division and served in Great Britain, had combat duty in the Philippines, and with Army occupation in Japan. We interrogated the Japanese soldiers, and it's very interesting.
Hey, when did you first go into service?
1942,
And were you drafted or enlisted?
drafted.
Drafted. And when did you take your basic?
My basic was at Fort Custer, Michigan, and also in Camp Richey, Maryland, which is now Camp David. You hear so much about, where they retreat for the president. Beautiful spot up in Maryland.
Now, tell me about basic. What was it like?
Well, had a military police basic, and it was, I don't know what else to say, it was just plain hell. It just drive a man crazy. You were just absolutely lower than low.
And how long did your basic last?
13 weeks then, and there's some mix-up in records, and I had to go through it twice. At the end of 13, I was crazy. At the end of the second 13, I never have got over it.
So after basic, where were you sent?
After basic in Fort Custer, Michigan, I was sent to Camp Richey, Maryland, for the military intelligence. And that was altogether different.
Tell me about that.
Well, as I say, it was a very, very beautiful spot, and they were all college students. There was not much soldiering going on. They didn't know much about soldiering. I don't think any of them had basic. This, I say basic, it was more of a school, actually, what it amounted to. I know we were right close to Washington, D.C., and we had a lot of the brass come down from Washington, D.C. to inspect or something. I don't know. I guess it's one of the trips. Anyway, we would have to march and drill for them, and our drill sergeant didn't know anything about the military either. And we were marching down Company Street, and it was a dead end. And he saw it coming. He didn't know what order to give to get us to turn, and we didn't like him very well, so we just kept it going. And he mumbled to himself. We piled up down at the end of that street, right into a barracks. And here this mogul was standing over watching. Whether we weren't court-martialed, but we weren't. He wasn't a very popular drill sergeant, so we were just kind of getting even. But that's the true story.
What type of training did you have there?
Well, it's mostly interrogation work. That was what we did. Our work in the field was actually two-phase. In the first phase, we determined the agents that we had on the other side, who were sympathetic to, in this case, Japan. And then during the combat phase of it, we handled prisoners, interrogated them as to where they came from, what supplies they had, and all such stuff as that.
And you say you went to Britain, England?
No, in Japan. New Guinea.
Oh, New Guinea.
New Guinea and the Philippines, and Japan.
Tell me about the trip over, the boat trip. Anything happen?
It like never happened. It was 17 days on high sea. Until this day, I don't like the seas.
What kind of boat did you travel on?
I think it's a victory ship. Not very big, you know. Oh my, but it was operated by the Navy, and I had Navy beans for breakfast. And that's just about as bad as basic training in Fort Custer. My, it was terrible.
Where did you sleep on the ship?
Well, they had bunks built with steel, and then a canvas swung in between them, and you slept on that canvas. And I'm not exaggerating. We got down near New Guinea. It was so hot that actually our perspiration from our bodies would have pools of water in that canvas. It was waterproof canvas.
How many, were they stacked or?
Yeah, stacked. Stacked, I'm guessing now, but I think stacked about 4 high.
How many men were on the ship?
Of course, that depends on the ship. But as I say, this victory ship wasn't very large. I don't know. I mean,
Remember the name of it?
oh no. All I know is our captain was from Arkansas, of all things.
And when did you leave the States?
Left the States, well, I shipped from Camp Richey across San Francisco sometime in late winter. So I shipped out of San Francisco in late '44. I believe that's right.
And you went straight to New Guinea?
Yes.
Now, were there still Japanese on New Guinea at that time?
They were kind of scarce, but they were there, yes.
And what were your duties in interrogation? What you did?
Well, as I said before, to determine the strength of their unit and their means of supply, how they got their equipment and supplies. See, the Japanese, at the time, they lived off the land quite a bit, and we were trying to determine just how much and where the supply did come from, if it came from outside.
What were the interrogation methods that you used?
Well, we had to have interpreters, of course, and that made it kind of awkward, actually, to use interpreters, because you'd ask a question and he'd have to translate it into Filipino or Japanese, whatever the case may be. But the Japanese were just scared to death of us. They were just horrified. And we had Japanese interpreters living with us. It was just amazed them, because they heard some terrible stories about us. We were going to rape all our women and rob all the banks and just do everything. That's what Hirohito told them. And we walked down the street, and if a woman was leading a child, she'd turn that child around to face the building, and she'd face the building while we went by. That was a way of insulting us. She would, they'd turn her back to us. We weren't loved very much.
Well, were you harassed any?
Ma'am?
Were you harassed any?
No, they were overly polite, really, as far as that goes. They just had certain mannerisms. You learned that they were putting you in your place. I wouldn't say we was harassed, but we were under the orders of General MacArthur. Incidentally, in New Guinea, I lived at MacArthur's orders. I know, I've been there many a time.
What kind of a man was MacArthur?
I wish you hadn't asked. I think General Wainwright said it right. You served under General MacArthur, and I emphasize under on purpose. You didn't serve with him. And it was kind of funny that, as I said, we was right in General MacArthur's area, and they were giving out medals all the time. They give them out the area. Well, I was in the area, so I got them. I got a cup full at home. And land, we were still in training then. Hadn't got into combat. But at mess hall, they just laughed about it. Well, General MacArthur wanted another medal, so he's passed some out, and they passed them out. It didn't mean anything, really. It became meaningless. We didn't earn them.
He was trying to buy your goodwill.
No, he wanted them himself. He's a very vain man. And he was getting good, all these medals, you know, for various other things. And I guess there must be some regulation that there had to be some justification, so he would justify it by awarding the area. But I'm not very crazy about the man, so you
But
shouldn't ask me that.
Were you in combat with him or not?
Well, of course, he was so far back we never saw him when the actual fighting took place. I did see the famous story that they had the cameras all set up. He was going to make his landing, you know. Well, he got out and he waded ashore and had things so fixed up so perfect, he hardly got his shoes wet. So he just said, cut that. He wanted to shoot it again. He backed off so he get the water up above his knees.
Yes.
It looked better.
Oh, and you saw that take
I
place?
saw that, and that's the truth, so help me God. That's what consumption back home.
You know what I heard was that Patton led his troops into battle and MacArthur sent his troops into battle.
You darn right. You're just as right as you can we had to stand parade for him in the Philippines. In the hot sun, we were in combat. He and his wife rode down in an open Cadillac, black Cadillac. We stood out in that boiling sun waiting for him to show up in the first place, and then stand in formation. When you stand at attention in the boiling sun, it doesn't take long for it to knock you out. I don't know what there is about it, but it'll sure knock you out when you're standing in the boiling sun. And the sun in the Philippines blew up, believe you me, we was around the equator. It was terrible.
And he made you wait.
We waited.
You wait.
We didn't ask any questions. As you can verify, no doubt, you have some experience.
What were your living quarters in New Guinea?
In tents. I drove up to his headquarters. We had the biggest PX in the area, his headquarters, of course. So I drove a brand new Jeep up there at PX to get something. Come out, and my Jeep was gone. It was stolen right in front of his headquarters. I had to pay for it. Couldn't find it, but we found it.
Who had taken it?
A Red Cross worker, believe it or not.
Oh? Well,
Yes.
maybe he needed it.
She.
Oh, she?
Yes, she.
What'd they do with her?
I don't know, but she had some extracurricular activities going, and
She just borrowed it.
it's just borrowed it for a
Yes.
little bit. Yes.
How long were you on New Guinea?
Oh, golly. It's been too long, mister. I don't know. I was at Landia. We shipped out of there to Manila. Incidentally, we hit Manila the day that the Japanese come down to talk turn with MacArthur, and we didn't know it. We didn't know what's going on. Of course, you don't know what's going on when you're in service, really, as far as the broad picture is concerned. And we got off, the MPs grabbed us. I thought we was villains or something. But the MacArthur and this Japanese hierarchy was poaching the area, and we didn't know that. And they grabbed us and put us under quarantine. That was the beginning of the end.
How long after the invasion of Manila did you land?
Oh, I can't say in months, but it's quite a while. After all, we weren't there very long. We shipped out of there to Osaka, Kobe, Japan for Army of Occupation. We weren't in that area very long. So, see, Manila had fallen.
What did Manila look like? Because I heard they had the big battle there.
Now, you're going to think I'm picking on MacArthur, but it's the truth. MacArthur had large land holdings in Manila, you know. And I-Corps, I was in I-Corps, and the 8th Army was racing to get into Manila, and they had orders to fire only on certain parts of Manila. And that came direct from MacArthur. That's to protect his property, and his property was not shelled. The other part of the town was level, but not his. I hope I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but I'm just telling you the truth. So.
Well, we've heard part of this before.
Yeah. Well, fine. That relieves me. I hate to say the ill of anybody, but I'm just telling you the truth as I saw it.
What did you do in VJ Day?
In VJ Day, I was in a plane on Negros. Now, Negros Island is where I actually saw combat. That's where the shooting was going on. And I got on a plane at Negros, and we were in the air, and the radio on an old C-47 told us that VJ Day. And here I was going on up north, and I want to go home. Well, I remember VJ Day.
Was there a big celebration when you landed?
No, everybody was just like I was. Heck, I want to go home. It's over with now. But no, we had to go to Japan, Army of Occupation.
What was your reaction when you heard about the bomb?
A great sigh of relief. To this day, Harry Truman to me is a lord. Because I was in Japanese orientation when that thing was dropped. And that saved me from going in on invasion. I was slated to go in on the initial invasion of Japan. And we, from our intelligence, we determined that they had tiers and tiers of troops dug in out to the beach. And the orders were, if anybody at the front line turned to retreat, he used to be shot from the people back behind. It was going to be a bloody mess. I tell you, that would have been horrible. They tell you how horrible the bomb was. Well, look what it saved. Oh my, that is true.
I've heard it saved 1 million American lives and 2 million Japanese lives.
No question. I would accept that wholly.
Did they give you any special training for the invasion of Japan, or what did they tell you? Well, of course, you said talk about the tiers of troops on the beach, but anything else?
Well, the main thing was to learn all you could about Japan and what you might expect. What I didn't expect is what we run into fleas. They like ate us up. Fleas. We had men go to the hospital from flea bites. We get in there and make temporary quarters, and the fleas were just awful.
You suppose they were planted there?
Oh, I don't know. I wonder if they're clean. That was my reaction to it. I don't know. I may be wrong. I'm just giving you an offhand opinion now. I know one time that General MacArthur sent down orders for us to take over the big telephone central there in Osaka. Osaka is a city of about 8 million, so it's a big central. And we went in there, troops, and took over the huge telephone center. And we actually had to kill rats. Rats running all over the floor. And we had bamboo sticks, and we fight those rats, great big old rats. It's so foreign the way we live.
Yes.
And I can't explain that. To this day, I can't explain it.
And what did you do with it after you took it over?
Well, I don't know. Like a lot of things, you know, hurry up, you know, and get all excited about something, and then you leave, you don't know what happened. I don't know what happened.
What was the reaction of the Japanese people to you?
Well, as I say, I was a varmint. However, I've been in their homes. I had a very interesting experience. Now, MacArthur was trying to determine at the time some nucleus on which he could form a democratic government. That was his goal at this time. So they sent us CIC agents up in the prisons to interview the political prisoners to get there, see what is anything there, or whether it's what the radicals. And that was very interesting. We got in those prisons, and I know it was about noon we got inside, and we saw they were walking around with the prisoners with baskets over their head. And I asked, of course, it was I am. I said, well, what's the idea of the baskets over their head? Well, they don't want to insult their ancestors. Let them see that they're in prison. And then I noticed they were served in 3 sizes, looked like, I would say, a stew. But 3 sizes of bowls, large, medium, small. And I said, well, why the difference? You serve some of the small size, some of the large size. He said, well, we just keep them alive. If they're going to be here a long time, they get the large bowl. But if they're just short-term prisoners, they get the small bowl, and so on. And just things like that, just how quaint they are. Because, of course, now today I'm satisfied it's an entirely different situation, but that's what it was then.
You didn't get a chance to visit our boys that were prisoners.
No, I never did. See, we didn't deal with our troops. We were dealing with their troops.
Did you come into contact with any, well, you just said that you had no contact with American prisoners.
No, but I know one night we had some Japanese as a rule, or they're small people, but we had an invasion of Marines, Japanese Marines, and that, I don't know where they come from. They don't look like the ordinary Japanese soldiers. They're much larger. My first day there, just green rookie, I had a frightening experience. The Filipino army was stationed there too, and they called me over. They had a Japanese prisoner they wanted me to interrogate. And we've been drilled and drilled and drilled about how fanatic the Japanese soldiers are. They fire themselves with hand grenades, you know, and then if you pull something, and you pull a pin, and you'd blow him up and you too. We were warned about that. And when I was called over to interrogate this prisoner, I was going down, frisking him, and I hit his shirt pocket, and a Japanese hand grenade is all about the size of a green roasinaire, just about so thick, about so long. Well, that's just the size that I felt here in his pocket. And I thought, my God, that's a hand grenade. So I kept my hand there, my finger down inside, and lo and behold, it was ear of corn. The old boy had picked that ear of corn. He starved to death, poor fella, and he'd been eating on it.
Mm-hmm.
But he just scared the living daylights out of me. I was green as gourd.
Mm-hmm.
And how long were you in the Army of Occupation?
Well, I know I left there in November. I believe we got there in about the middle of summer, as I recall. Incidentally, that was the most fantastic sight I ever saw in my life. We pulled in there, the fleet took us in there, and in the morning we got up, and just as far as you could see were ships of all descriptions. Battleships, troop ships, and then it was just getting daylight, and you could see the Osaka. It was burnt to a crisp, just stubble here and there. And look back over here, and here's all this mighty army of America. And over there was Japan, burnt to a crisp. It just told the whole story in one glance. It was a rather emotional sight, really.
Yes.
And was this at Tokyo Harbor?
Osaka Harbor.
Osaka. Where were you when they signed the surrender in Tokyo Bay?
Well, I was in Osaka all the time. I never left Osaka.
Did you get to Nara or Kyoto?
No. I don't know why. You kind of get in a strange frame of mind. And I got going to Tokyo, but I never did. It was just about a day's drive from where I was. I had a Jeep assigned to me. I could go on up there. But I wasn't interested. I was interested in one thing, getting home. That was all. And everything else that didn't amount to anything.
Did you have good food all this time?
Yes, we had exceptional food. Really. It was exceptional at Fort Custer. We got lots of belly goat in Fort Custer.
Mm-hmm.
You could smell it before it came. But in Camp Richey, we ate better than you all did.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my, yes. All due respect, I didn't mean that any slur in that.
Well, where did you go to school?
I went clear through school here as far as the grade school and high school.
Mm-hmm.
Started in first grade and graduated in high school. Then I went to the University of Missouri, Columbia, Missouri.
Columbia. Mm-hmm.
Because I had a job up there. That was in the 30s. That was 1930 actually.
Mm-hmm. You worked your way through
Absolutely.
college.
I had to find a job, and I got a job at Columbia.
What did you major in?
Engineering.
Wasn't military then?
No. If I never seen more military, it'd be too soon. I wasn't very enthused about my military experience, although some of it was rather interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of job did you have at Columbia?
Oh, I'm sorry you asked that. I was firing a furnace at a sorority house, and it had a steam boiler, and I never saw a steam boiler in my life. We had a furnace at home, no coal furnace, you know, and at night we'd bank it.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd have a fire in the morning. Well, I tried to bank that thing, and it just burned all night long. Well, those poor girls, I drove them out of the sorority house. So I got fired off of that job. I didn't last long.
Then what you did?
I was janitor at KSIW, not KSIW, that's here, KFRU in Columbia, Missouri radio station, because my brother-in-law ran it. he saved my life.
What was it like going to college in the Depression, 1930s?
I tell you, it was pathetic. I've seen fellows actually fry an egg on a flat iron. You do that by just tipping the end of the egg, and then just pour it out of the flat iron very slowly, because it'd run off, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But you get your flat iron how hot as you can get it, and then just pour it off real slow. Of course, it's flavored with, you know, whatever you're ironing. But if you're hungry enough, it's all right. And I was rich. I ate in the tea room. I remember very well. My lunch cost me 25 cents, and that was from soup to nuts. But short rations, they didn't allow very heavy. But 25 cents is all I ever paid.
Most, go ahead.
Did you live on campus or off campus?
Off campus.
Most of the kids that went to school those days wanted to go. They were willing to work their way through school. And they had no help from anybody.
Awful lot of them did work way through school. That's true. Awful lot of them.
I know kids that put pasteboard in their shoes every morning, new pasteboard.
Oh yes, I've done that.
You've done that too?
Yes, I've done that. My father was a preacher, and you know, preachers don't get rich. Just getting by.
What were the fashions that the kids wore at college in those days?
Well, I just concerned about staying warm. I didn't want to concern about fashion. So really, I know I wore boots up there in Missouri. It snowed pretty heavy. I wore leather boots. But I wouldn't say that was the fashion of the time. It was the need, I thought. Maybe it wasn't.
Who was president of U of M at that time?
Oh, what did you ask me? I should remember that, and I don't remember.
Any professors that stick out in your mind?
Yes, I had a Canadian professor in chemistry, and she'd say aluminium for aluminum. I never heard that before. Canadians all say that. And the class had about 350 in it, and it was elevated seats. And she would stand down there with a long bamboo pole and shake that right in your face. Mr. Quisenberry, what's so-and-so and so-and-so? And all I could see was that bamboo pole flapping in my face, and I couldn't call my name. How I passed that course, I'll never know.
Well, what else?
Well, what church did you say your father ministered?
Christian church.
Christian church.
You know any history of this little church that was moved from Fort Supply?
No, I don't. I understand they bought that down the river, didn't they? Or you see, getting back to that story on that mule skinner, there wasn't any roads here in that time. In fact, I was on the surveying crew that laid out this 270 goes here to Oklahoma City, and that's the first time we ever had it with downstate. Woodward at that time was a Kansas community, really. Our contacts were all the Kansas City Star. I was raised on that. I didn't see any Oklahoma papers or anything like that till I was in high school.
Well, that Kansas City Star was a must.
Oh, that's
My dad just lived by it.
That's sitting in our home right next to the Bible.
Where'd you get your discharge?
From Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. When they gave me that piece of paper, I didn't even wait for a train. I went out and got a taxi, took it to Kansas City and got on a train there and came home.
Were you married during this?
Yes. Married with 3 children.
And how did your wife manage? Did your pay keep her and the children Army pay, or did you?
I hope so.
You hope so.
That's all I can say on that. I hope so. I got out of the Army as a buck sergeant, so I wasn't a high-powered officer on big pay. Buck sergeant doesn't draw a whole lot. I think my wife was drawing the whole sum of $75 a month from me.
Well, at that time, when you could get bread for 10 cents a loaf.
Well, that's
a
right.
lot of money.
That's right.
That was a lot of money.
That's right. I don't all due respect to my wife, she's a good provider, a good manager. I don't think she suffered. I think she got by.
Where was she living?
Here.
Here?
I left here to go there from here.
April 9th, 1947.
Oh my. Yes, I was home that evening. I just got in off the territory and was visiting with my family all in the front room, and we didn't have any warning system at all. We didn't have any warnings was coming. But all of a sudden the wind started blowing awful hard, and I got up to check the front door and be sure it was latched, and the carpet was up. And when I stepped, it went down. Well, the suction was on, but I didn't know it. And you know, I kept my family in that front room. When that storm, it killed people within a block of me. The high school was destroyed. But believe it or not, I was shingling the house at the time, and I dipped the shingles in a stain and set them up on a rack to let them drip dry. And when the storm was over, every shingle was in place. I'll take a sworn oath, I didn't lose a shingle. I can't explain it, so help me. Yet, within a block of me, that big brick building was demolished.
Any damage at all to your house?
No.
Well,
What part of town did you live in?
We're on 9th Street, 1623 9th, just about straight through here on 9th.
So how far were you from the big damage where everybody was killed?
Well, we're right at the edge of it. As I say, this fine, magnificent high school building was destroyed, so it was right close.
Did you help in the cleanup or help with the
Yes,
wounded?
we did.
What'd you do?
The big trouble with the cleanup was the debris, and you're getting flats all the time. There were just nails everywhere, and you just couldn't hardly go a block without having flat. It was terrible. And the Mennonites, some down south here, they bought up, they're wonderful people. The work they did was just absolutely beyond description. But they bought up a lot of army trucks. They signed them out for us, and we used them for our cleanup.
What did the Mennonites do?
Oh, they just do everything. Shoot, they weren't supervising. They were getting their face dirty. They were making repairs. They cover your roof so you wouldn't have a lot of rain damage and so on. They just did everything.
What did you do to help clean up?
Well, haul trash to the dump. We had so much of that trash, the road just be blocked with it.
Did you help with the wounded?
Well, my father-in-law, Dr. Day, was a doctor, and I had to take him to the hospital. They had to call in all the help they could. And I actually saw them, if a person would die on the cot, they put the body down below and put another person up here to work on. It was kind of gruesome. And the horrible shape the bodies were in, there were slivers of wood in their body. It was horrible.
How many were killed in that tornado?
Over 100.
How long did it take to clean Woodward up after the tornado?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, but the night of the tornado, the relatively small hospital at the time was overflowing. Just, I said they were on the floor. But within 12 hours, that thing was so organized that they were flying bodies to Wichita and Kansas City, and the hospital was empty. Yeah, I don't know who was in charge of that, but they did a magnificent piece of work. Really.
And who took care of the deceased?
Oh,
There'd be so many that...
Yes, you're right. And it was horrible. They would go up and down, actually went up and down the street with loudspeakers, calling for people to help out at the cemetery. I know our church was turned into a morgue. They were embalming bodies there. So it was just a community effort. Everybody pitched in.
What did that storm sound like?
Well, have you ever been around a jet airplane when they res her up? That's about as near as I can get to it. just a kind of a whine roar. Oh my.
And how long did it last?
Well, really, it didn't last very long. It was moving right along. See, that went down. That was the longest tornado in our history. It's still the biggest one ever hit in Oklahoma. Going down over here in Texas, went clear through here and did a lift, went clear up into Kansas before it lifted. White deer, Kansas. White horse. White deer in Texas.
White deer.
Yeah.
What was your wife's name?
Mary
Mary, what was the maiden name?
Day. Dr. Day is a long time. He was superintendent up here at Supply Hospital. That's where I got married.
What's the
As an inpatient, yes. Rub that out, that isn't official.
How many kids do you have?
I have 4, 3 boys and a girl.
What's their names?
Mary Frances is the daughter, and Roland, Jimmy, and Johnny. Incidentally, when I was in Japan and I had to go in these homes to interrogate them, they'd ask me that question. And invariably, one of them would turn to the other, he's got 3 children. I had to correct him. I said, no, I got a daughter and 3 sons. Well, the daughter didn't amount to anything, see?
Oh.
And they just ignored it. I correct them, they just say, no, he's got 3 children. And that's all I had in Japan, 3 children.
And that's the way it was in Japan.
That's the way it was in Japan. A woman didn't amount to anything. You would go in the home and land, all the bound scraping them. And the wife was never present. She's always back in the kitchen or someplace. I don't know where she was. Strange.
Well,
Now,
in their offices, did they use girls?
yes, they did. I've been in some big offices, especially in those penitentiaries. And they had a formality they always went through. I don't care how many times you enter an office, you had to have tea. It was so watered down, you couldn't quite taste the tea, but you had tea. I don't care where you went, you had to have tea.
Weren't you kind of afraid to drink it?
No, no, they were obedient. They didn't give us any trouble. And we'd go out at night. I know one time I went to a barber shop, get a haircut. And it's like you do, I expect I should sit down waiting my turn. Well, they were getting up out of the chairs and offered me the chair because I wasn't supposed to wait, I was an American.
Oh.
So we were kind of having, around still pill a little bit. Not a whole lot, but a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you have anything else?
What can you think?
Well, really, I want to apologize to you all. I don't think I have much to offer.
Well, I think you had a lot to offer. It's a different phase of the Army than what we usually get.
Well, I didn't expect me talking about the Army, but it was kind of interesting. I guess we have to have it every once in a while. And if that's all, I'll leave.
Did you approve of the agreement that MacArthur made with the Japanese? And they signed the agreement to stop the war?
I was so happy it was over with, I'd agree with anything at the time.
Oh, you would?
Yeah, I was very happy.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing I have to agree with what MacArthur did. The Russians were going to come in and occupy the Northern Islands. And MacArthur said, no, you're not. And he backed the Russians down. I'll have to agree with that.
Oh, make no mistake about it, he was a brilliant military man, I think.
Because he knew if the Russians came in there, they wouldn't leave.
Yeah. I didn't agree with his philosophy, I shall return. There's a few others that are going to have to go in there with him, you know, or ahead of him, in fact, actually. So I didn't like the I shall return bit.
You weren't in that part of the Army?
No.
You didn't go in, you didn't go back in with him?
No, I didn't go back in with it.
I've heard that was rough.
In fact, I hate to tell this story. It kind of puts me in bad light, but this is the truth. Talking about going in. We did go in, invasion of Negroes. And our captain was a very nervous sort. And believe it or not, I had a .38 pistol on my hip, a Tommy gun across my lap, and a carbine. I was in a Jeep in Iraq. I'm like, yeah, I had enough firepower there to start a war over myself. We went in there, we was on the Higgins boat, and they let that lip down, and I drove off. You know what we was greeted by? A bunch of high school kids and grade kids. Oh, they're having time of life. Go see the Americans.
Oh.
Here I was loaded down. I loaded for bear. Greeted a bunch of school kids.
High school kids.
Yeah. So
Now,
that
where
was
was
my
this?
invasion.
Where was this?
Negros.
Well, I mean, what island or what place?
Negros Island.
Oh,
Yeah, that's one of the islands of the Philippine chain.
Yeah.
I see.
Mindanao, Negros, Manila. I remember.
See, is Leyte the big island? Is Manila?
Yes, you're right. Lady
Manila
is
is
the
on
big.
the island of Leyte, is that?
Manila's on the island of Lady. I used the wrong
Yeah.
term there. You're right.
Because there's thousands of islands
Oh,
around there.
I reckon there is.
Yeah, all different sizes and shapes. Well, I guess that's it.
Well, I can't think of anything.
I appreciate your all's courtesy.
Well,
Thank you very much.
we've enjoyed this. I have. I've enjoyed it a lot. And I can't remember who told me about you, but I'm glad that you came.
Thank
I've
you. Thank you
enjoyed
very
it.
much. Well, I won't take any more of your time.
Sir, what's your address?
1702 20th.
I'm sorry,
1702 20th.
Woodward.
Now my tape will go